Hello, everyone. My name is Reese Garlinsky, and today we're going to be looking at some of the most important events around the world. And specifically, today we're focusing on Nepal. So, this nation on September 8th of 2025 joined three other Southeast Asian countries that have overthrown their government, and that overthrow being done by the people of that state. In this case, there's many things that went into it, but the main backing force of this big overthrow was the young Nepali citizens themselves. The biggest trigger was that the government banned 25 social media platforms that were being used to express discontent with the government, and because of that, a fire was lit under these people, the Nepalis, and the government was soon overthrown after protest turned to something much, much greater. But a whole lot more went into that than just a little protest and just some social media. So we're going to get into that today about all the different things that went into what is now being dubbed the first Gen Z revolution, as the very young population of Nepal is what overthrew this government, among other things that went into this big change for this nation. So we're going to get into that very soon. I very much thank you guys for being here. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope we get to learn something today. The last 20 years of Nepali political history has been defined by corruption, nepotism, and bribery. This all starts mainly in 2008 when there's a shift from the official monarchy of Nepal being taken down and restructured into a new system so that Nepal could take its big leap towards modernization in a mostly monarchy-free world. A promise was made by the new government saying that Nepal, in its new era, would be built on economic growth, opportunity for change, and ability for everyone to be represented within Nepal. However, pretty much the common sentiment in Nepal is that this promise has not been kept. For years, Nepal has been one of the poorest countries in South Asia. The hope with removing the monarchy was that this problem would be challenged, that it would start to go away. But that is not the case. The new government was meant to push out the monarchy and push out any of the old issues of Nepal. But today, the government of Nepal is known heavily for its oppression, nepotism, and limits on any type of change for anyone because of how corrupt it is. I keep bringing up the word nepotism because it's been so rooted and a deep growing problem within Nepal and its government. In 2017 was one of the first cases. The president of the Nepal Congress ran alongside his wife so that they could both maintain power within it. This would help bring her into a direct position of power within the Nepal government. Another one happened in 2022. Investigations into different political happenings revealed that many political candidates who had just gained positions were directly related to many political elite within Nepal. On top of that, there was the former Prime Minister, Sher Bahadur Deuba, who appointed his mother-in-law to a powerful position within the government, the foreign ambassador position. All of these are examples of what's been happening in Nepal's government. It's not here and there. It's not touch and go. It's a very common practice that has kept many people from jumping into the political elite of the nation and jumping into any position that has any influence or success attached to it without knowing the right person. The corruption goes deep, and in this way, it's formed through nepotism, and this was becoming very apparent to the people of Nepal. Leading up to 2025, the youth of Nepal, which is a notable amount of the nation, have continued to lose their faith with their government. They believe this government does not represent them, mainly in the fact that there's corruption so deeply within their country, and there's a lot of divide between what's proposed by the government and what actually happens. A bigger issue with this is the class struggles of the nation that have highlighted all the divide that was already created by the corruption the government placed. Nepal has a very young population, as I said. About 60% of said population is under 30 years old, but despite that, there's a 20% youth unemployment rate. The lack of growth for Nepal's economy has led to their GDP being unstable, and that has led to low buying power, which has made basic goods, rice, cooking oils, things of that sort, very expensive for the common Nepali because the government itself isn't generating enough money to bring those goods in at a reasonable cost. The cost is being passed to the consumer, just like with tariffs here in the U.S. The consumer is the one that's feeling government interaction and the way government's handling itself. We're the ones paying. And in Nepal, it's people who are unable to pay for basic needs as easily as they were before because of issues with financing and the lack of buying power in Nepal. Many in Nepal have blamed the government for this and the fact that the opportunity to gain work and gain a successful career without being a part of the corrupt circle or the nepotism circle is very hard within this country. This also goes with the fact that this nation is heavily based its economy on tourism and remittances. Remittances are when a person from a country works abroad and sends money back into the country for their family. Nepal is one of the few countries that depend on this super heavily, so their workers aren't even valued in Nepal, they're valued more elsewhere, and are able to make more money there sending it back to their family than working in their own country and stimulating the economy directly. Recent studies have shown that a quarter of Nepal's GDP is from remittances, and that is mainly in employment in the Gulf countries. Over 1.5 million Nepalis work in different Gulf countries and send remittances back to the country, making up about a quarter of that GDP, as I said. The issue with that is that there's heavy instability in the Gulf region, most of that caused by geopolitical conflict and other things like that. But because of that, it's become very hard for Nepal and Nepalis to consistently make money in that region of the world and send it back, thus hurting the Nepal economy, which overly relies on remittances. The other industry that's overly relied upon is tourism. It makes up about 6.5% of the GDP, but employs about 12% of the people in the working force. The issue with that is that there's not enough jobs. People who want to work in tourism can't find jobs in tourism, and people who have graduate degrees in other things outside of tourism can't find jobs outside of tourism or in tourism itself because of the fact that this itself is overfilled, over-relied upon, and most of the good jobs there also come from nepotism. There's lots of layers of issues and why Nepal is facing instability and why its people feel there's no way for them to move, and that their government is not making the right moves to actually push back against what's happening here. Social media has become a very important vector for Nepalis to express their feelings because they haven't felt safe doing it in the traditional sense, in protests, because of recent events over the last few years. One of them was August of 24. 3 youths were arrested pretty violently after they were found in the capital chanting different political slogans at a political candidate. This is a suppression of rights and suppression of expression, which most countries would deem ridiculous. On top of this, Ruby Khan, who was an human rights activist, came to the country to protest for the right of 2 femicide victims. She was arrested for this and was made into kind of an example for the way that she protested, which also inspired the youth to fight back. On top of this, people who supported politician Robbie Lamaclane were hit with water hoses for gathering in his name and trying to support his political movement. About 80% of the internet usage in Nepal has gone towards social media and connecting through it. That is why so many protests were organized on social media. Protests were organized on there instead of in person because of how much more easily and less trackable it is for the people. So social media has become very, very important to the youth. Many protests have come about, and now we're at the point earlier this year where Nepalis were fed up. The youth was calling out the lack of employment, the cost of basic goods, the nepotism, the corruption. They're angry about that and they want to call it out. Different protests were organized online, and because of that, the government made a sweeping ban on September 4th of this year. So this mix of lack of buying power and opportunity combined with the unemployment rate sparked a lot of anger in the youth, and the youth of Nepal started to look into it and realize that it is really hard to not get somewhere without knowing the right person, without being tied to an elite circle, without having a family member in the right industry. All that has led to huge protests and social movements calling out the nepotism issues. Hashtag Nepo babies and hashtag Nepo kids have been used on social media platforms by Nepalis throughout this 2025 year to call out the issues in specific jobs, specific businesses, and overall industries within the country. So social media has become very, very important to the youth. Many protests have come about, and now we're at the point earlier this year where Nepalis were fed up. The youth was calling out the lack of employment, the cost of basic goods, the nepotism, the corruption. They're angry about that and they want to call it out. Different protests were organized online, and because of that, the government made a sweeping ban on September 4th of this year. They banned 28 different social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, because they, quote-unquote, did not register with the government. As soon as this happened, the final straw broke the camel's back. The young Nepalis have gone from using social media to protest and gather in a small way to going after the government directly. On September 8th, without social media, without proper planning, without a proper way to organize, thousands of young Nepalis, mostly in the Gen Z age range, under 30-ish, marched to the streets of Kathmandu and were ready to challenge the government. Major sites in Nepal and symbols were destroyed, streets were tarnished, and the parliament building was occupied. All of this pressure was placed heavily on Nepal's government by the people who were fed up with the corruption and now the restriction of their right to talk, gather, and express themselves. On September 9th, the Prime Minister, Prasad Oli, was forced to resign, and this led to a direct movement straight towards getting a new Prime Minister. The Prime Minister that they've moved to put up into power is a former Chief of Justice from the Nepal Supreme Court named Sunshila Karli, being the chosen replacement based on her very anti-corruption stance. Now, all of this has been very Gen Z and very youthful, but if you haven't thought it's gotten enough yet, if it isn't a very young Gen Z revolution, listen to these 2 points. The way that they've elected this prime minister and put her into the position to rise up is actually a Discord election. Discord being the app that young people use to communicate for gaming and send pictures and all that. They actually used a voting poll on that to boost her up into an actual political status where she might be the person to run the country now. And then the next level is this. A symbol that has been present across many revolutions that I'll talk about not just here in Nepal, but as I cover different countries in the world that are going through major changes, mainly because of the demands of the youth, the Gen Z generation. A symbol for that is common across all of them is the Straw Hat Jolly Roger, the pirate flag of the Straw Hats from the show One Piece. Now, why that's relevant is huge, and it's important to me because it's my favorite piece of media ever, and you need to be watching it. But it's not just because it's some show about pirates, it's because it relates to real life, and here's why. The legendary manga, best-selling of all time by the way, and anime One Piece follows the story of these pirates that fly this flag. This is the Straw Hat Pirate flag, which is the main pirate crew of the show. This crew constantly battles against the world government, which in this show is an extremely oppressive government meant to represent oppression around the world and within the show itself. They fly this Jolly Roger as they go through many adventures and battles against this government to battle corruption and all the different ways it is seeped into their world and can be mirrored into ours. For Nepal, this is bigger than anything. This show has inspired generations to appreciate media, appreciate fiction, and appreciate anime, but in this case, it means so much more. It has inspired something much greater in Nepal. This flag has been flown not only at the protests as a kind of calling card, but also as a battle flag on the day that they overthrew the government. This flag isn't just something cute from a show. To people, it represents one of the main values of the show, which is freedom. The main point of the show One Piece is freedom. What the main characters chase is freedom. Freedom from oppression, freedom from restrictions, freedom from not being able to live the life you want. And the Nepalis, the youth, has felt heavily that their government is stopping them from living the life in the way they want. They want to live in Nepal. They want to love their country, but they're unable to because of the way the government is running things. So with that, they have flown this flag, the Straw Hat Jolly Roger, the Straw Hat Pirate flag, so that they can symbolize their need for freedom and kind of possess what those characters talk about in the show. And their main point being that freedom is worth any cost. Freedom is worth any sacrifice, any battle. Freedom is worth any loss, even if that is the loss of a government, loss of people in power, or loss of control in the country when you have to move things around to get that freedom. And there have been major costs, major sacrifices. Damages to the capital from these protests are at an estimated $22.5 billion in US dollars, around half of the GDP of the nation for 1 year. 74 people died in the protests, 61 of them activists, 10 prisoners, and 3 cops, and there have been at least 2,100 injured in some way, shape, or form. On top of this, tourism, one of the biggest industries, has been slowed down almost to a complete standstill in wake of this because of the fact that there's been considered instability in Nepal that other countries have warned their people not to travel Nepal about. And there was a cost internally too, not only the lives, but the divide. Many people in Nepal supported this move, but there are many that thought this was too aggressive. To push out a government that was elected legally, they feel is undemocratic. Going against the government of your nation is unprideful, is wrong. There is a divide in Nepal between those that believe in this movement and don't, that believe in this radical action and don't. But it's undeniable the change it has brought. And that brings me to this, which is the question of what's next. I wanted to bring this to your attention because of the fact that it's happening in the world today. People are protesting and changing their government from within. They're not just accepting the result of something that affects their lives permanently. They've given the government chance after chance after chance to do right by them, and it hasn't worked. Since at least 2008, it hasn't worked, and now here we are almost 20 full years later, and the Nepali citizens are sick of it. The youth grew up as children with the new style of government and haven't seen their parents' problems get fixed, and now they're adults facing these same problems. But this is the real world. This isn't fiction. As great as One Piece is, as great as the story it tells, it is a fiction. But in real life, these Nepalis, real human beings, overthrew their government, ran by human beings who were not doing right by them. And I bring all this up to say that you need to be aware of this because the world is changing. And I want to bring as many eyes as possible onto the fact that there's corruption still to this day, and it's present today. And it may not look like old school corruption you heard about in your history books where someone's waving a dollar in front of a politician. It's this stuff. It's where people who are just born in the right family have infinite more opportunities than another person. It's people doing things the right way, trying to get a job in the industry that their government supports, and they can't do it because there's corruption, because there's nepotism, because the opportunity for growth isn't enough, because of the fact that they can't afford cooking oil and rice and other important things, because the government is not doing the job to have enough buying power to get by. Now, in conclusion with all that, I just want to say, we don't know what's next. Will there be a change to the lifestyle, the representation, the opportunity of Nepal? Will these young people get the country they want in the next 5-10 years? Who knows? The jury is still out, but one thing is for certain. The youth of South Asia are ready to fight for what they believe in, and they are not the only people in the world who have that same sentiment. The youth around the world is fed up. They're angry seeing the world they've inherited, angry seeing the way their countries are running things, but they're not here to give up. They're here to create change for themselves and for the nations that they do love very much. So that's all I have for you today. I like to talk about what's going on in the world because it should not be just me, one geopolitical history nerd who knows this. The whole world should be aware of what good, bad, and awful things are happening around the world today. So with that, I'm very, really glad you guys tapped in today. I hope this was entertaining for you, and I hope even more so that you come back for more of this, more history, and more of whatever I can provide for you. So one more time, my name is Reese. That was Nepal, and this is just the start of us learning a whole lot about what's going on all around the world. You guys have a good one.